Welcome to educational channel of sureshbhattclasses. In the series of fast calculation tricks, we are going to find the square roots of perfect squares. In my video of fast calculation tricks, basics, in which I had asked you to memorize the tables up to 20, squares up to 25, cubes up to 10, square roots of numbers up to 10, and so many other things I had asked you to memorize by heart. Now, if you have already memorized the squares up to 25, then it will be very easy to find out the square roots of the numbers which are the squares of numbers up to 25. Now let's go for the properties. The number which are perfect squares always end with 1, 4, 5, 6, 9 or even number of zeros, that is 2 zeros or 4 zeros or 6 zeros, and those numbers which end with 2, 3, 7 or 8 are never perfect squares. Now, if the number is a perfect square and ends with 1, then the square root of that number is either 1 or 9. The number which ends with 4 and a perfect square, then the square root of that number is either 2 or 8. The number which is perfect square and ends with 5, then its square root also ends with 5. The number which is perfect square and ends with 6, then its square root ends with 4 or 6. And the number which is perfect square and ends with 9, then its square root ends with 3 or 7. A number which is a perfect square and ends with even number of zeros, then its square root ends with 0. We will see it by some examples. 121 is the number which is a perfect square. It ends with 1. So the square root must end with either 1 or 9. And we know that 121 is the square of 11. So 11 also ends with 1. This way, the number ending with 1 has a square root ending with 1. Similarly, the number 361 is a perfect square and ends with 1, and the square root of 361 is 19, and the number 19 ends with 9. Thus, we can say that the square root when ends with 1 or 9, its square is ending with 1. Our next example is 144. 144 is a perfect square ending with 4, and the square root of 144 is 12, which ends with 2. And the another number is 324, which is a perfect square. It ends with 4 and its square root is 18. So when the number which is perfect square and ends with 4, then its square root ends with either 2 or 8. Our next example is 225. 225 is a perfect square and ends with 5, and its square root is 15, which also ends with 5. Another example is 625. 625 is a perfect square, ends with 5, and square root of 625 is 25. So whenever a number is a perfect square and ends with 5, then its square root also ends with 5. Our next example is 196. 196 is a perfect square and its square root is 14. And 256. 256 is a perfect square and its square root is 16. So whenever any number which is a perfect square and ends with 6, then its square root ends either with 4 or 6. Our next example is 169. 169 is a perfect square and its square root is 13. And 289 is a perfect square and its square root is 17. Thus, when a number is a perfect square and ends with 9, then its square root either ends with 3 or with 7. The other example is 100. 100 ends with even number of zeros and it is a perfect square and its square root is 10. Thus, when a number is a perfect square and ends with even number of zeros, then its square root also ends with 0. These are the examples of numbers which are perfect squares and ends with specific numbers 1, 4, 5, 6, 9 or even number of zeros. Then its square root ends with 1 or 9, 2 or 8, 5, 4 or 6, 3 or 7 or 0 respectively. The numbers ending with 1, 4, 5, 6, 9 or even number of zeros may or may not be perfect square. But if these numbers are perfect square, then this property will always be true. In competitive exams, when the question is of asking the square root of given number, then we should assume that the number is a perfect square. But if the question is for approximation, then it may or may not be a perfect square. We are going to solve some questions in which the question is find the square root of the numbers. Then we will assume that these numbers are perfect squares and we'll find the square root by using this property. And we will follow certain steps to find the correct answer of square root. Our first question is finding the square root of 1681. Now this number ends with 1. It means that its square root ends with 1 or 9. So we will write 1 or 9. Now after leaving 2 digits from the right, the number is 16 and 16 is a perfect square of 4. So we will write 4 in both the numbers. So the square root of 1681 is either 41 or 49. So this is our first step of finding the square root of given number. Now we have to identify which one is the correct square root of the 1681. So our second step is we will find the squares of the number which are close to these numbers and end with 0. So the numbers are either 40 or 50. The square of 40 is 1600 and square of 50 is 2500. Now the number 1681 is more close to 1600. It means that its square root is close to 40 and which is 41. So the square root of 1681 is 41 and not 49. Our next question is finding the square root of 3844. This number ends with 4. It means that the square root of this number either ends with 2 or with 8. So we write 2 and 8. Now after leaving 2 digits from the end, the number is 38 and we have to find the perfect square close to 38 and less than 38, and that number is 36. 36 is a perfect square of 6. So we will write 6 prior to 2 and 6 prior to 8. So the square root of 3844 is either 62 or 68. Now again, we'll find the squares of 60 and 70. The square of 60 is 3600 and square of 70 is 4900. The number 3844 is more close to 3600, hence the square root of 3844 is more close to 60 and that number is 62. So our answer for this is 62 and not 68. The next question is finding the square root of 5625. As this number is ending with 5, a square root must end with 5. Now we write 5. After leaving the last two digits, the remaining number or remaining portion of the number is 56. And we have to find two such number which are consecutive and the product of these two number is 56. So 7 and 8 are these two numbers whose product is 56. And we have to take the lower of the two numbers. So we will take 7, which is lower of 7 and 8, and we will write 7. So the square root of 5625 is 75. We know the property of the numbers ending with 5, and the square of these numbers is it ends with 25, and the after leaving 5 the number is 7, and we have to multiply it by the next higher number of 7, which is 8, and 7 times 8 is 56, and 56, and we write 56 and then we write 25 after 56. So the square of 75 is 5625. The next question is the number given to us is 7056 and we have to find the square root of it. The number ends with 6, hence its square root must end with 4 or 6. So we write 4 and 6, and after leaving last two digits the number is 70 and we have to find a number which is perfect square lower than 70 and close to 70, and that number is 64, which is the square of 8. So we write 8 prior to 4 and 6. So the square root is either 84 or 86. Now we have to find the squares of 80 and 90. The square of 80 is 6400 and square of 90 is 8100. Now the number 7056 is more close to 6400, hence the square root must be close to 80, and thus it is 84 and not 86. Here 84 and 86 are very close numbers. So another method of finding which one is correct, we go to the mid number of 84 and 86 ending with 5, which is 85, and the square of 85 is, we write 25 because it's going to end with 25, and the after leaving 5 the number is 8 and we have to multiply it by next higher number, which is 9, and 9 times 8 is 72. Now the given number 7056 is lower than 7225, hence the square root must be lower than 85, which is 84 and not 86. This way also we can find which one is the correct square root, 84 or 86. The next question is we have to find out the square root of 8649. As the number ends with 9, hence its square root must end with either 3 or 7. So we write 3 and 7. Now after leaving two digits from the end, the remaining part is 86 and we have to find out a perfect square which is lower than 86 and close to 86, and that number is 81, which is the square of 9. So we write 9 with both the numbers. Either the square root of this number is 93 or 97. Now we will follow the same step and we will find out the squares of 90 and 100. The square of 90 is 8100 and square of 100 is 10,000. And we see that the given number 8649 is more close to 8100. As such, the square root should be close to 90. Thus, the square root of given number is 93 and not 97. The next question is, we have to find out the square root of 9801. As the number ends with 1, hence its square root must end with 1 or 9. So we write 1 and 9. After leaving 2 digits from the end, we get the number which is 98, and the number lower than 98 and close to 98, which is a perfect square, is 81, and 81 is the square of 9. So we will write 9 with both the numbers. So either 91 or 99 is the square root of 9801. We will follow the same rule. The square root of 90 is 8100 and square root of 100 is 10,000, and the given number 9801 is more close to 10,000. So the square root must be close to 100, and this way 99 is the answer to the given question and not the 91. We go to the next question. We have to find out the square root of 11,664. The number ends with 4. It means that the square root must end with 2 or 8. So we write 2 and 8. After leaving last 2 digits, the remaining part is 116, and we have to find out the number which is lower than 116 and is a perfect square. So that number is 100, which is perfect square of 10. So we'll write 10 with these two numbers. Thus either 102 or 108 is the perfect square of 11,664. Applying the rule of finding the square of number close to these numbers ending with 0 are 100 and 110. So square of 100 is 10,000 and the square of 110 is 12,100. Now the number 11,664 is more close to 12,100. As such, the square root must be close to 110, which is 108. So our answer is 108 and not 102. You can pause this video and solve the remaining two questions, which are finding the square root of 15,876 and square root of 21,609 using the same procedure. Now let us find the square root of these numbers. The square root of 15,876, this number ends with 6. Hence its square root must end with either 4 or with 6. After leaving last 2 digits, the number is 158, and we have to find out the number which is close to 158 and is a perfect square, and that number is 144, and the square root of 144 is 12. So we write 12 with both the numbers. So the square root of given number is either 124 or 126. Now applying the rule to find out which number is correct, we will find the square of 120 and 130. The square of 120 is 14,400 and square of 130 is 16,900, and the given number is 15,876 is more close to 16,900. As such, the square root must be close to 130 and not to 120. This way 126 is more close to 130. So 126 is the square root of the given number and not the 124. We can apply the mid value rule, and mid value of 124 and 126 is 125. So square of 125 ends with 25, and after leaving 5 the number is 12, which we have to multiply with next higher number, which is 13, and 12 multiplied by 13 is 156. So the square of 125 is 15,625, and the given number is 15,876, which is more than 15,625. Hence the square root of given number should be more than 125, which is 126. Hence our answer is 126 and not 124. Our next question is, we have to find out the square root of 21,609. The given number ends with 9. It means that the square root of this number must end with either 3 or with 7. Now after leaving the last two digits, the remaining digit form a number which is 216, and the number lower than 216 and is a perfect square is 196, which is the square of 14. So we write 14 with both the numbers. Thus either 143 or 147 is the square root of 21,609. Now applying the rule of numbers ending with 0 and close to these numbers, we have to find the square of 140 and 150. The square of 140 is 19,600 and square of 150 is 22,500, and the given number is more close to 22,500. Hence the answer should be more close to 150, which is 147. Hence the answer to the given question is 147 and not 143. Finding the square root of given numbers, the short trick which we have used is the fast method to find the square root. The other method is a long division method, which is going to take lot of time. Hence we should adopt this method, and this way we can find the square root within few seconds of given number. This method is only applicable to perfect squares and it is not useful for imperfect squares. But when the question in the exam is find the square root of given number, then we will assume that the given number is a perfect square and we will adopt this short trick to find the square root. Here completes this video. Please like and share this video to your friends who are preparing for competitive exams and placement interviews. Don't forget to subscribe this channel. Also press bell icon to get the latest notifications.